I was doing rock music reviews in Seattle at the time, and we actually did that. I mean, we had a garage called, if anybody can remember the name of the garage, I have a prize for you. Remember the name of it? Who said that?
Devo.
Would you be interested in having
Devo.
Devo? Okay, you said it. Who's it? Okay. I don't know.
You got a prize.
You just won a prize, sir. We just re-released, we just redid the DVD and an LP, and Devo, you just won this. Okay, I think this is available at Light in the Attic Records. They just released the soundtrack, and it's got the remastered DVD inside. So if anybody else is interested, it's there. I wanted to bring one so you all guys could see it. And so anyway, back on track, I was just saying, you know, we love skating Devo. I mean, we used to skate that place a couple times a week, and we found other garages, parking garages in Seattle. So there was this idea of skateboarding to hell for your girlfriend sounded so romantic. And in really my complete naivete and innocence at the time, I thought, why don't we do the Greek myth on skateboards? What the fuck? You know? So that's the result.
How much did it cost, and where did the money come from?
Well, let's see. I think we were in the can for $164,000, and yeah, it was shot on 2/3 of it was shot on 16, 1/3 of it was shot on half-inch Betacam. Do people remember that? Beta SP? Ooh, it's going back. And at the time, there's this thing called non-linear editing that we have now. That didn't exist on video then. So we edited, we conformed everything on 1-inch, and when we made an edit, that was it. So, you know, you can drive a few trucks through some of the pauses in this thing, but, you know, it was hard to tell how it would play. One of the filmmaking 101 things you learn is that things on a bigger screen, you know, it takes it in a different way. You see it differently than on a small screen. It takes a shorter amount of time. Big screen, it doesn't. So we didn't have the benefit to really see what it was like until we got to a 35mm print. So to answer another part of the question is we blew it up to a 35mm print at a place called Image Transform, which was doing this very experimental thing, taking 1-inch tape and making 35mm prints. So that's what you guys saw. So the whole thing, I think, all together was probably around 200,000. And where did
Wait, what was the name? It was Image Transfer?
Image Transform?
Transform. Do you know of other features that came out of there?
I think we were the only one. I mean, basically, they were. I think we proved to be a very cumbersome and awkward deal. I mean, the only reason that they were doing it is they were taking corporate videos, and they wanted. I think their clients. They had Image Transform had clients that wanted to have their videos in a theater for, you know, their parties or their seminars, and they wanted it to play for, you know, hundreds of people at the time. In 1990, there wasn't a way to project video on a large screen unless you blew it up to 35. So most of what they had done were 25, 30-minute corporate video films, and so we were on the bleeding edge inadvertently.
This movie just feels so specific to its time and place, but there's someone in it who is kind of emblematic of the Northwest at that time, and it's the guy you've seen the movies on the crippled and on the skateboard the whole time, and that's a poet named Stephen Jesse Bernstein, right?
Yes, Steve.
Can you talk a little bit about his legacy and how you got to know him?
Well, Stephen was one of the performers that I produced at this arts space that I started in '78 with 5 other friends called On the Boards. And I met Jesse through that. He came and auditioned for me to be in this program called Northwest New Works. And his partner at the time was the woman who plays the video tarot reader, Susie Schneider. And the two of them did a couple of shows for me. And basically, I was explaining to Tommy earlier, you know, I started out, you know, being involved in more contemporary performance and theater and dance things, and started programming it for the organization on the boards. And so I sort of found myself videotaping all these artists and videotaping Stephen, Jesse Bernstein, and Susie, and most of the people you see in this film, you know, I did live theater work with. He was our Charles Bukowski. He was just an amazing poet. You know, if you like poetry and you like work that is edgy and just really vivid, he's just fantastic. And the name The Gray Zone, by the way, that's where he basically, when I met him, I said, dude, where do you live? And he says, well, I live in an apartment next to the railroad tracks down in the shipyard. I said, what kind of place is that? And he goes, that's the Gray Zone. I said, got it. And so anyway, yeah, he was amazing to work with.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Yes, along those lines, how did you manage to hook up with the guy from Ministry?
Roland Barker was in a band before Ministry. He was in a band called the Blackouts with Bill Rieflin and his brother Paul Barker. And I made my first music video for the Blackouts, and that was probably around 1988, something like that. And I did this music video for them, and so I got to know Roland in that way, and Bill. And my producer, Lisa Anna Dutton, was dating Roland at the time, and you know, she really roped him into it, and we're really lucky to have him. So that was a really fun thing. So, anybody else?
Where was the full pipe that comes out in the movie?
The which pipe?
The full pipe that he's skating through? Where in Seattle?
Oh, that was down in the industrial area. There was, there was a lot of metal percussion, as you probably noticed. And so we were always looking for locations where there was steel fabrication and that kind of stuff. So in South Seattle at the time, there was a lot of factories and big pipe thinning places. And we found this amazing, as you can tell, this amazing, like 60-foot long pipe. And one of my guys said, "Oh, I can skate that. Let me skate that." I said, "Okay, we'll let you skate." So I guess it was just location scouting, South Seattle.
Like near Georgetown?
Oh, if you know it, yeah, it was down there by Georgetown. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a little south of Georgetown, but in that neighborhood. So you know it.
Yeah, I live in Seattle.
Okay, great. Well, one of the things that is interesting about the whole, container village in the Gray Zone and the whole thing is that it's interesting now that they're actually using containers to create low-income housing. That's something that is actually happening. I don't know if you guys knew that, but in Detroit, they're actually using containers to retrofit them into living spaces.
In Austin, they just turn them into bars.
Because they have multiple purposes then. Yeah, great.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So you mentioned your background in skating and in rock music, but there have been some other cinematic treatments of the Orpheus myth. Were you keeping those in mind when you were making this movie or shooting the movie?
Well, I was a big fan of Jean Cocteau films, both with Orpheus and the second one, the name I can't remember. Do you remember it?
Blood of a Poet?
Yeah, Blood of a Poet, I think it is. I think you're right. And then Black Orpheus, and I was familiar with all of them, and I loved all of them. You know, they were great, and that was a big influence. So, yeah, those were things that were part of my gestalt at the time. And although you know, I wasn't trying to do anything like, but I also I think I went to the opera, you know, in Seattle. They did a production of Orpheus as well, and so I guess I was an Orpheus groupie.
I also picked up that when they were backstage, they were drinking beer, labeled as beer. Now, for me, that's a Repo Man thing. Were you conscious of that?
No. No, it's not. Or, you know, I'm not sure how much I was conscious of certain things. You know, I was just sort of channeling the whole thing. I wasn't. I didn't know that was there. How is it a Repo Man thing? Explain to me.
In Repo Man, most of the products that people consume are pretty generic. So you can buy a can of food labeled as food.
Food.
And then when they drink beer, it's just beer.
Yeah. You know, it wasn't really on my radar. I mean, the thing that was cracking me up tonight, though, was that shredded wheat scene. Basically, that was what was supplied for craft service for 4 weeks. So, I mean, that's true. That's a true story. They said, well, we're not going to give you any money, but here, you know, how about 10 cases of shredded wheat? Okay, deal. So,
Any other burning questions?
Well, I noticed the makeup and the costumes and the fashion was very stylized, and it had this very like new wave, but very punk feel at the same time. I just wanted to know, how did you keep it so consistent throughout the movie? Like, who was the guy that was like, it's got to look like this? Like, and where were you driven by that? Like, what was the notion towards that fashion that y'all had going there?
And where'd you
Of
buy
the
them?
post-apocalyptic new wave.
yeah. Well, the one thing I have to tell you is that we were really lucky. We had this wonderful woman by the name of Marie, and she had a really spectacular overview of the whole thing. We actually, the film started out as a short, and the Eurydice Door show was actually shot 2 years before, or maybe a year and a half before, with a different costume design person. But basically, we based it on the Eurydice Door show look in a way. And so the whole idea of kind of like that wetsuit top for Orpheus and the mirror jacket for Hades was something that Marie took that and took it to the next level. There's a great story about her too, though. She was just immersed in sort of the goth culture. She was a very goth person herself. And so I think that just kind of came through. But she also wanted to branch out from that a little bit. So when Orpheus was in wedding mode and in the Eurydice Door show mode, she was saying, well, let's go for maybe a little more David Bowie sort of look here. And so that was part of the influence. She was a wonderful woman too, by the way. There was one night we were shooting down in the container yard, and we had 20 kids all fired up to do a bunch of skating. And it was night exteriors, and she was arrested on her way to the set for unpaid parking tickets. So it's one of the exciting stories that we have. She was there. She was like, and she actually got her car impounded and taken to jail. And so luckily we had enough petty cash that night to bail her out. we used all our petty cash to bail her out that night. I'll never forget it. You know, that was good. And we had some, I mean, it made for a tough night because, you know, on independent films, there's usually a daily thing where something goes wrong with an effect or a prop or hair and makeup. And especially, I've learned if you have more than one woman in hair and makeup, if you think it's going to be an hour, plan on it being 2. Because this is the way it rolls. And so we learned some things like that back then, and they're still true today on this recent project I'm working on. But there was a lot of amazing stuff. I mean, almost every location that you see in the film, most of them were stolen. I mean, we just stole all those locations. And back to the Eurydice door show, when the Furies come out from the sliding doors, what do you call those, the garage door, sliding open thing. My cameraman had in his supply of toys, he had these big bazooka-like smoke generating machines. And we did like 20 takes, and he kept on screaming, "We have to do it again, more smoke. More smoke." And every time we do it, "There's not enough smoke." And it was kind of like Christopher Walken going, "More cowbell," you know, it was just out of control. Well, what we didn't know was that we were in the bowels of an old train station that wasn't in use at the time. And so every time we do a take, we'd send a fresh plume of smoke up through the building, and it started pouring out, unbeknownst to us, it was pouring out the windows. And then suddenly we hear fire trucks coming from all directions. And they pull up, and then, you know, there's this big guy, the chief of the fire department, who's going, "All right, who the hell's in charge here?" And everybody's pointing at me. That's the guy in the loincloth naked over there. And anyway, it was a classic example of, you know, begging for forgiveness and not asking permission.
Well, thanks for coming out and sharing your vision and your beautifully loincloth.
We're gonna end on that one, okay? All right, and thanks to all you guys for coming out, and Light in the Attic Records if you want to get the soundtrack and the remastered DVD. Thank you so much.
Thank you.